This is the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition. Coming up,
most of them were going to synagogue once a week. All the holidays were kept, especially the Pesach.
1933, a big, very astonishing event happened which shocked the whole city of Harbin. His young child was kidnapped.
The community in Harbin built this city from nothing into an incredible international powerhouse, particularly in the 1920s and 30s.
So sit back and enjoy the trip with David Harris and Mark Gordon.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm David Harris, and I'm travelling without my best friend and co-host of the podcast, Mark Gordon. He is still somewhere on the Mediterranean, although that particular journey is coming to an end. We will hear from Mark at the end of this podcast, where he'll tell us how his time has been. If you remember back the last time we were in Tianjin, which at its peak had a Jewish community of 5,000 people who were really there in the first half of the 20th century, most of them leaving by 1948-49 with the establishment of the State of Israel and with the rise of the modern communist Chinese state. So we looked at the community, we heard from the cultural attaché at the embassy in Beijing. Beijing's about a half an hour train ride away from Tianjin. In this episode, apart from hearing from Mark at the end, we're really going to hear the story of the Jews of northeastern China, those who came from Russia and other parts of Eastern Europe and settled in the early part of the 20th century in Harbin and turned it into an incredible economic force for northeastern China and indeed far beyond. That's to come. Let's have an ad and then I'll tell you all about it.
Outside of Buenos Aires, where would you recommend visiting?
Tell us why you've got a passion for Jewish history as an author.
Is there something unique here that you won't see anywhere else in Georgia or even the world?
Why on earth would you take this incredible boat and launch it in Israel of all places?
Has David Hasselhoff been to the David Hasselhoff Museum?
You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition with Mark Gordon and David Harris. We had two possible ways of travelling from Tianjin, which is close to Beijing, 1,000 kilometres or around 700 miles to the north to Harbin. One possibility, and this is the same the world over if you don't have to traverse water, you can either travel by train places or you can fly. And there's always a debate which way is quicker, which way is more comfortable. My personal view is where possible to take the train because then I can actually see things on the ground a lot easier than I can from a plane. But that's me. And I felt lucky. We took the train from Tianjin, a 7-hour journey, 6-hour journey, all the way up to the north of the country. We're about 600 miles away from Mongolia. We are about 230 miles away from Russia. North Korea's not too far away either. Harbin is the great northern city of China. These days, it's famous for its wonderful ice festival that starts at Christmas and runs through to the end of February. It's a major oil producing area. I believe it now produces more oil than Qatar, so I understand from our tour guide. But it's the Jewish history that has brought us to this part of the world. So we arrived at the train station, a bus picked us up, and we've got an amazing guide. He talks in Chinese and then the wonderful Jay translates. Maybe we'll hear more from the two of them as a double act later in this podcast. But the people on the bus, these wonderful 7 Israelis whose ancestors came from this part of the world, all came from Harbin. They were half listening, and they were listening, but they were also looking out of the window. And suddenly one of them, by the name of Millie, says, "There's the Jewish Museum." She was here in 2008. and she was really excited. It turns out that was one of the former synagogues. There were 2 synagogues, to the best of my knowledge, in this town. And then a minute later, we passed another building, and that's the home for aged Jewish women. And then there was the Jewish middle school, and then there was the main synagogue. And there was so much excitement on the bus. I wish I could have been recording, but I was just watching with neshama, with heart, with soul, these people thinking about their origins. So we're going to hear a lot of their story over the next couple of days here in Harbin, and hopefully we'll get an interview with 1 or 2 of them.
This is Mark Gordon from the Jerusalem Post Podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod, or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com.
We're now in downtown Harbin, and we're finding out where we are. We're outside a building that was a former soup kitchen and home for the aged, but we're going to get a bit of a translation from Jay from what the guide is saying.
They started the construction of this place in 1918. It used to be a house for the female elderly, but also it used as a free canteen for the Jewish. And they started the construction in around November 1920. And now this building is used for the tax authority right now, so the officers working inside. It's called Jewish New Synagogue. It was built in 1916. New synagogue.
So now we're on a very busy intersection, actually not too far from where our hotel is, maybe half a mile or so. I guess we're going to get over this junction as quickly as we possibly can. It's rather busy. One of my colleagues in this group almost got knocked over, and we're going to look at a synagogue. There's a large Magen David above it.
The old synagogue cannot host so many Jewish, so they started to build this new one in 1916.
1916年规划，但是18年才开始奠基典礼，1921年建成的。
Okay, like in 1916 they started the construction and they finished, like put in use in 1921 in 1921. So started to use in 1921, so started almost 5 years to start construction.
So this is what they call the new one.
New one, this is a new one.
And what is it now?
Jewish History Museum.
So this synagogue, the new synagogue, has been closed for renovation since September of 2025. But walking around the building, you get the distinct and obvious impression of a synagogue. Stars of David everywhere. There are some very plain windows, and you can kind of sort of on tippy toes see in a little bit, but the group's quite disappointed because they've not been able to get in here, but hopefully we'll be able to go into the other museum in town tomorrow. As is my wont, went down a side alley to try to peek into the synagogue, and I got really close to a side door, and it's glass frontage, and behind it there's a metal grill, and suddenly the metal grill pulls open and there's this very, very austere man in Chinese uniform, and he, as they say in Hebrew, he gave me the no, no, no. He wagged his finger and looked at me angrily, and I scarpered fast. Now we're moving away from this new synagogue, and we're going to look at some of the other buildings that made this very heart of Harbin really a Jewish neighborhood.
This is a Jewish bank called the Jewish National Bank. I don't know if you can figure out something from here. It used to be a Jewish bank. We call it 犹太国民银行.
Today, the store that we're looking at on the main pedestrianised drag is a jewellery store. The bank began in 1923.
Start to build this building.
对，5星
A 5-star hotel.
时髦时尚的意思。
Moda means fashion in Russian. That's how he named this hotel.
1933年，在这儿发生了一件震惊哈尔滨的大事件。
In 1933, a big, very astonishing event happened which shocked the whole city of Harbin. His young child, a guy, was kidnapped by Japanese but through to Russians. His youngest son was a very famous musician and he had a lot of performance in Europe. Actually, he had a lot of performance in French. And because he had like a kind of suffered life in French, so he told his father, where can I go? So his father asked him to come to live in Harbin. So he came here. At that time, the Japanese know Joseph was very, very rich guy. But when the Japanese asking for ransom, his father believes even he gave the ransom, the Japanese will not release his son. His son was abused by the Japanese at that time during the kidnap. And he was murdered in the end. Because of this incident, like the Japanese murdered his son, so the Jews started to unbelieve the Japanese. And step by step, the Jews moved to Shanghai, the city of Shanghai. Starting from 1938, when Japan kind of had a better relationship with Germany, and then the Japanese who lived in China started to like damage or abuse the Jews who was living in China.
We've passed lots of stores that were Jewish banks and a hotel and other enterprises, and now we've come to a side street off the main central street, and we've come to a building that's clearly not been used for some time, and it says construction of the Harbin Jewish Hospital started in June 1933 and was completed in 1939. Today it serves as the Harbin Ophthalmology Hospital. The Jewish hospital was considered the best medical facility in Harbin. Today it's not even the ophthalmologic hospital.
Harbin Fact File. Harbin is around 400 kilometers or 300 miles from the borders with Russia and North Korea. The Mongolian border is about double that distance. The city is served by Harbin Taiping International Airport. You can fly into Harbin mainly with Chinese and Russian airlines. You can connect to Harbin through any of China's main hubs such as Shanghai, Shenzhen and Beijing. You can fly into Beijing direct with Air China, Air France, Emirates, Etihad, KLM and Lufthansa. There are direct flights from Tel Aviv with Hainan Airlines to Beijing and Shenzhen. You can get downtown from Harbin Airport via the airport shuttle bus for around $3. That will take up to 80 minutes. Taxi and ride hailing costs around $14 to $21 for a 50-minute trip. David stayed at the mid-range Habsburg Hotel. Other recommended lodgings include the Ritz-Carlton, Songbei Shangri-La Hotel and Steigenberger Harbin. $1 will buy you 7.05 yuan as at early 2026. Harbin has a continental climate with extreme seasonal contrasts. Winters are very long, dry and bitterly cold, often lasting from November to March, with temperatures frequently dropping well below freezing and sometimes below -20 Celsius, -4 Fahrenheit. Summers are short, warm and humid, with July being the hottest month with occasional heavy rain. Harbin food reflects the city's Chinese and Russian influences. Guo Baoru is a famous local dish of crispy sweet and sour pork slices. Daliba is a dense, slightly sour rye bread brought here by Russian settlers. A popular fish option is braised carp in soy sauce, made with freshwater carp from the Songhua River and cooked with ginger, garlic and a rich savoury sauce.
I'm surrounded by octopuses, mushrooms, stingrays, jellyfish, and I'm about to hit my balls into a snail.
Just the experience of watching two robot arms making your cocktail for you.
I've got this strapping thing on and a very small piece of metal that is going to hold my body on a rope.
And we were fighting as snow shifters
Against yetis. So we're both in very nice floral dresses.
You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition with Mark Gordon and David Harris. We had a wonderful dinner around a Lazy Susan. In lots of Chinese restaurants, there are Lazy Susans. The waiters come in and put the plates down on this central turntable, and you spin it around and stop when you want something and hope that somebody else doesn't move it around as you're dipping in. At the end of the meal, one of the group, by the name of Galia, who lives in northern Israel, not far from Haifa, decided it was time to call her mother. Her mother left Harbin when she was 16, and she began to regale the group with her memories. And now it's time to meet the first member of our group. So tell me who you are and what you represent.
My name is Jacob Metlin. I'm the chairman of the Association of Former Jewish from China and the fourth generation of Jewish who immigrant from Russia to China in 1900, 125 years ago. Our organization established something like 70 years ago when a lot of Jewish immigrants left China from a few cities, Harbin, Tianjin, Shanghai, and they did an aliyah to Israel. The main reason was the Zionism, because they were in Beitar. They knew that Israel established as a country, and it was important for them to be part of the building of New Israel. The second reason is that when the Chinese communists conquered all over China, they asked nicely but thoroughly all the white people to leave China. And the Jews, of course, were part of the white people and had to leave. Few of them went to Australia, few to America, but most of them came to Israel and immediately established this organization. They had a lot of meetings, they have parties, and they support each other. They built a moshav called Amikam. They had a settlement in Tel Aviv, in Ramat HaChayal, and also were part of the kibbutz Ramat Rachel near Jerusalem.
Let's go back. Let me take you to the late 1800s, the 1880s, the 1890s. What was happening that led to your ancestors moving to Harbin?
The main reason that they left Russia and went to Harbin was the building of the railway station that was running from Sibir through Manchuria to China. And they were following this railway, which was already built, and came to a very small and poor village called Harbin. These Jews that were coming to Harbin was a little bit different from the image of the Jews that we think of Europe. They knew how to protect themselves, and they were very ambitious. Only after a few years, they built a hospital, they built bakery, beer factory, and a lot of businesses, and make this village become a city that were the center of all north of China. Today, Harbin is 8 million people, and around here, another 25 million people. At that time, there were something like 30,000 Jews, but their influence was very, very important to the city. Few of them also left to Japan and did a lot of big business all over the world.
We're sitting in the Habsburg Hotel, where the reception staff are dressed in Austro-Hungarian clothing from what we in Britain would probably call the Edwardian period, from the start of the 20th century. Just a couple of blocks away from here, right in the heart of Harbin, is where it all started.
Yes, we can see even today 2 synagogues that were built by the Jews that were here in the beginning of the 20th century. Big buildings with very heavy stones still existing till today. The Jewish community was very strong, and even when the Jews in Ukraine had the problems, they raised money and sent a lot of clothes and money to help their friend in Ukraine in that days. My family were dealing with buying and selling racehorsing, and did a lot of money. My grandfather even had an hotel in Harbin, but when the communists become the leaders here, they eliminated everything. I can tell you that all over the years, something like 60 years that the Jews were in the area of Harbin, they never felt anti-Semites. They felt like they are partners of the Chinese, they are partners of the Russian people that were here, and they were very appreciated for their contributions to building of this city.
Were they more Russian or more Chinese? What language did they speak? What culture did they have?
They were totally Russian. They were eating Russian food, they were talking Russia. There was an opera in Russia. The schools were in Russia. Only the boys, like my father, that left China when he was 20 years old, he had Chinese friends that were playing with in the street, and therefore he knew the language. But, for example, my grandmother, she doesn't know the language, she doesn't know the food. She raised her family as a Russian Jews Russian. The Judaism was very important to them. Most of them were going to synagogue once a week. All the holidays were kept, especially the Pesach. The Pesach was something that weeks before they were preparing and cleaning on the house, boiled all the pots and all the things that touching food, and it was a very, very big ceremony. They were similar to the Jews today in Israel. You are not religious, but you are Jewish.
To what extent do you have a connection to Harbin today in your home in Shoham in Israel?
I have a few statues from Harbin. I have a carpet from my grandmother, which was made in Persian 130 years ago and was brought from Harbin to Israel in 1956. I can tell you that in my home parents, we live Harbin as it was there. We used the sheets and the towels, and we talk Russian, and we eat the Russian food. And my father, even so, he died 89 years old, and 70 years of his life he was living in Israel. He always says that his best life was in Harbin.
And he liked ice cream.
And he always says that the ice cream that the Chinese made on the street in Harbin is the best ice cream all over the world.
If anybody is interested in the work of your organization, do you have a website? Is there a way that people can read about your work?
We have a website, of course. We have an office. We have very good connection with the third and fourth and fifth generation. We give every year scholarship to each member of our organization if he learn in a university or every high institute. We give every 3 months to soldiers who are serving in the army a small present. In the war, of course, we gave a lot of presents for all our people that were in the reserve. I can tell you that today we are united more than 1,000 people that around this issue, because a lot of people understand that if you want to know where to go, you have to understand where you come from.
So just look up the Association of Former Residents of China and you'll find out all about this amazing organization. As you know, I've spent already a few days with them and they do incredible things. So here comes the hard question, 2 parts. Is this your first visit to Harbin?
Yes, it's my first visit in Harbin. And I feel totally different from all the last trips that I made to China, because I feel that I'm visiting my hometown.
We just played pool around the corner. Your father was snooker crazy. We've driven past the synagogues. But tomorrow we're going to make the most poignant of visits, which is to the cemetery, which was moved from the centre of town, but the place where people lay to rest, where the tombstones are, that will bring back memories to so many. How are you feeling personally ahead of that visit?
Especially the visit in the cemetery, where I shall see the tombstone of my grandfather, is really, I feel that I'm closing a circle. Unfortunately, my father died 4 years ago. He visited 20 years ago Harbin, but he would love to hear from me that I'm now visiting and see where he lived and the cemetery, of course.
Jacob, Yaki, thank you for the interview, and thank you for letting me join this trip and being a part of this emotional experience.
יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה, ועל מה דיברה כרובדה וימליך מלכותה, יצמח פרקנה ויקרב משיחה. בחייכון ובחכון.
We've arrived at the Jewish cemetery. It's located outside of the downtown area. The original cemetery was moved here in 1958 as the city was redeveloped. Over a 4-year period, some 800 graves of the original 3,000 were moved to this new site. Also, Chinese and Muslims and Russians found new burial sites because the city just simply had to grow. If you can hear people talking in the background, that's the group of the Israelis and our guides and people from the cemetery. And we just stopped next to one particular grave, and it says on it, Yaakov or Jacob Matlin. And if you remember, just a few moments ago, we heard the voice of Jacob Matlin. And that, of course, is because we've arrived at the grave of his grandfather. He stood in silence for a few moments and placed a stone on the grave. And now the other members of the group are searching for the graves of their loved ones.
אמא אמרה לי שהקברים נמצאים אחרי הקבר של סבא של יאשיק. מצאנו את הקבר של סבא. כן.
That's Galia, who lives in northern Israel, talking to her sister. Last night she spoke with her mother, and they're trying to establish where their grave of their grandfather is. She is a cousin of Jacob Matlin, and what she's being told by her sister is that the grave of their grandfather is very close to that of Jacob Matlin. At the entrance to the cemetery is a monument signed by former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, himself a descendant of a Harbin Jewish family. And on the stone, in his handwriting, he thanks Harbin for the way it sheltered his family and those of many others today living in Israel.
וברחמיו יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל, אמן.
Just 1 month after we made the trip to that graveyard, Galia's mother in Israel passed away. It's perhaps poignant that whilst we were travelling around Harbin, Galia, a beautiful singer, took the microphone on our bus and began to sing a song. The translation of its title is Come, My Mother. listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition with Mark Gordon and David Harris.
Hello,
Mark,
David. Buongiorno.
Yes, buongiorno, but it's not for you, is it? You've been sick.
Yeah, I've got the sniffles, or whatever the Italian is for the sniffles. I've done my little loop. I've left Barcelona, bypassed Marseille because I was in bed, and I've been out in Genoa today. Genova.
How is Geneva, however you want to say it, Genevieve?
From the ship, it looks stunning. It's like all built on a hill leading down into the port. The buildings are like 15th century, 16th century, really stunning and colourful. And then when you get out of the ship and you start walking around, it's a little less well looked after. But I mean, there's some beautiful cathedrals there, stunning, large buildings all over the hills. We went on the tourist train, so we got to see everything. And even on a Sunday, the traffic in the centre of Geneva was like terrible. We were stuck in a traffic jam for 10 minutes. But no, I'd really like to spend more time and see it.
So let's put it on our... I hate using the term bucket list, but let's put it on our list for upcoming trips.
Definitely. Oh, and yesterday, parked next to our ship was the Costa Smeralda.
Oh!
For those of you that were listening to our podcast back in February, we were on the Costa Smeralda, somewhere near Abu Dhabi. Parked next to me in Marseille yesterday. How sweet.
And those of you listening to today's podcast will notice that Mark twice has said parked instead of docked.
Yes. I said ship at least instead of boat, but we can't get it all right.
Yeah, we're just abysmal. We really are. Anyway, so you're meant to ask me how I'm doing.
So how are you and how's China?
What a good question. We're wrapping up our time in, if you will, Jewish China, although we still do have Shanghai to go. And hopefully you'll be able to hear about Shanghai in the next podcast in this series on the Jews of China. But the real highlight of the Jewish communities of China of the 20th century is Harbin. I know lots of people think that it's Shanghai, but the community in Harbin was far greater and probably, or possibly, far more influential. It really built this city from nothing into an incredible international powerhouse, particularly in the 1920s and 30s.
Tell me more about Harbin.
Listeners have already had a good taste of it. But what I think it's fair to say is that it's an inland city. It's about 400 kilometers or 300 miles or so from the nearest sea, which is kind of where the border of Vladivostok in Russia and North Korea meet. But it still has a bit of a maritime feel to it because of the enormous river that flows through the city. It's at some points as much as 1 kilometer or about 3/4 of a mile wide. And so you've got that feeling of almost a port town. And as you're driving alongside the river, there's lots of, it's not entertainment, but lots of walkways and little parks and so on that really give you that feel that you're in the seaside. But it's the center of the town, which I didn't really talk about in the pod because I was focusing more on the Jewish areas, which is absolutely beautiful. And it's very cold outside. It's not the coldest it could be at this time of year, but it is absolutely packed and so lively.
I was going to say, when you said Vladivostok, that to me says cold.
Yeah, theoretically at this time of year, it can get down to about -10. We're leaving this part of town in the morning when the temperatures start to dip. If you come here for the incredible ice festival that takes place from Christmas Day until the end of February, then temperatures can get down to about -30 Celsius, which is very...
That sounds freezing. So I finish my cruise tomorrow and then I'm spending a few days in Rome. So shall I join you tomorrow at some point when you're in Shanghai?
Yeah. Do you have any thank yous you want to give out?
Thank you, David, for taking the cold weather and bringing it to Barcelona.
And thank you, Catherine, Mark's wife, for looking after Mark while he's been sick the last few days.
It's been very good.
Oh, and I'll say some thank yous as behooves us at this point to the team at the CCECC, which is the Chinese engineering umbrella company that brought us over here. They don't engineer umbrellas, but it is the umbrella company for lots of engineering firms that do incredible things all around the world, including in Israel. So thanks to Eric, to Jay, to Eyal for being amazing, to the tour guide over here in Harbin by the name of something like Boer.
Excellent. I've got to run off because it's quiz time now. Do we have a quiz question?
We absolutely do. Let me do it very, very quickly. The question was, which Talmudical college or yeshiva had to, because of the Second World War, initially flee Poland and then flee Lithuania and ended up in Shanghai? Do you know the answer?
It's not Gateshead. It's not the one we visited in Lublin, is it?
No, I'll give you a clue. Think Russian space station.
Sputnik.
Space station.
Soyuz.
No.
I give up.
Mir. The Mir Yeshiva.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks to, it's a whole long story and you haven't got time for it, but hundreds of Talmudical scholars were saved and safely saw their way through the entire Second World War, even with all of the repression of the Japanese. Once the Japanese conquered China, they survived perfectly well and then set up shop in both New York and in Jerusalem, where they still thrive today. That's the podcast.
Have a good time. I will speak to you when you're in Shanghai.
I'll talk to you in Rome. Be well.
Bye-bye.